I still don't know whose voice it was. I've told myself it was the house. I've told myself it was grief. But somewhere beneath all of that, in the part of me that goes quiet when I'm alone at night, I know it wasn't either of those things. My grandmother died in March, not dramatically, not suddenly. She just stopped, the way old things do. We buried her in Murray, on a hill where the pines leaned sideways from decades of wind. I was the one who cleaned out her house. Everyone else had reasons not to. I didn't argue. I thought it would help me grieve. The house sat at the end of a narrow lane in the older part of Rawalpindi. 2 floors, thick stone walls, windows that never quite sealed. She'd lived there for 40 years, alone. After my grandfather passed, she didn't redecorate, didn't rearrange. Everything stayed exactly where he'd left it. The house felt curated, for someone who was no longer there. I moved in the first week of April, just temporarily, I told myself, just to sort through things. The first night, I heard footsteps on the upper floor, slow, deliberate, like someone choosing where to step. I stood at the bottom of the staircase for a long time, just listening. The sound stopped. I told myself it was the structure settling. Old houses do that, expand and contract with temperature. I went to bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling until the shapes of the room became familiar. Until I convinced myself I was alone. I was not convincing myself correctly. By the second week, I'd developed a routine. I'd work through her belongings during the day, sorting, cataloging, boxing. At night, I'd cook something simple and read until I felt tired enough to sleep. It was during one of these evenings that I first saw it. I was in the kitchen. The light above the stove had a flicker I hadn't fixed yet. In that intermittent light, I saw my shadow on the wall, and then I saw it move. Not when I moved. A half second before, I froze. I watched the shadow on the wall stand perfectly still, while every instinct in my body told me to run. And then it shifted, just slightly, like a person adjusting their weight. And I heard the faintest sound. Not footsteps, not a creak. Breathing. Close. Behind me. I turned around, and there was nothing. Just the empty kitchen, the flickering light, the smell of cumin, and something older underneath it. I called my cousin Daniel the next morning. He's the practical one in our family. An engineer, not easily spooked. He came that Saturday with tea, and a healthy amount of skepticism. "You've been alone too long," he said, sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table. "Grief does things to the mind." I nodded. He wasn't wrong, I thought. He stayed for dinner. We talked about her. Real memories, warm ones. By the time he left, I felt lighter, tethered to something ordinary again. He called me from the road to say he'd gotten home safe. That was the last normal conversation I remember having. That night, I found her journal. It was in a box I hadn't opened yet. Underneath embroidered cloth and old correspondence. The journal was small, its cover worn smooth. I almost set it aside. Instead, I opened it. She wrote about something she called the sitter. In her careful, slanted Urdu script, she described it as a presence that arrived after grief, that it followed mourning the way infection follows a wound. She wrote that it wore your face, that it learned your habits, before you noticed it was watching, that it was patient, the way only something ancient could be patient. She wrote, "Do not look at yourself in mirrors after dark. It is not always you, looking back." I put the journal down. I looked at the window beside me, black with night, my reflection pale and still in the glass. And I watched my reflection tilt its head. I had not moved. I stopped sleeping. Not out of choice, something in my body refused. I would lie down and feel the distinct, terrible sensation of being observed. Not watched from a corner, observed from inside, like something was cataloging my thoughts, memorizing the architecture of my personality, quietly preparing. I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I called again. He texted back hours later. I haven't spoken to you in days. You haven't called. I checked my phone. The calls were there. The timestamps were there. He'd never received them. The night it happened, there was no warning, no building dread, no sound. I woke at 3 a.m. to find myself standing in the upper hallway. I had no memory of walking there. I was standing in front of my grandmother's old bedroom door, and from inside the room, I heard my own voice, speaking, slow and calm and deliberate. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence of it, the rhythm of my own speech patterns, the pauses I make when I'm thinking. It was reciting something, practicing. I put my hand on the door. The voice stopped. Silence, so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, very quietly, from directly on the other side of the door, "I know you're there." I left the house that night. I didn't pack. I drove to Daniel's apartment in the dark and sat outside in my car until sunrise, because I could not make myself go inside anywhere. Could not trust any enclosed space, could not trust the dark. When he found me in the morning, I told him everything. He listened. His face did something I didn't expect, not disbelief, but recognition. "She told me about this," he said quietly. "Your grandmother. She made me promise not to tell you." "Tell me what?" He was quiet for a long time. "That it doesn't leave," he said. "Not once it finds someone." He looked at me carefully. "She managed it for 40 years. She thought if she didn't tell you it existed, it wouldn't notice you." I thought about her empty house. 40 years alone in it. I thought about how she died. It's been 4 months. I don't live there anymore. I sleep with the lights on, which helps, until it doesn't. I've read everything I can find. Folklore, psychology, things in between. Nothing quite names it. Nothing quite explains the way I sometimes catch myself in a window's reflection, standing differently than I'm standing. Tilted, patient, looking at me the way you'd look at someone you're not quite done with. There are mornings I wake up, and I'm not sure how much of the night was mine. I'm still here, I think. But some nights, when the house is quiet and I'm almost asleep, I hear breathing that doesn't match my own, and I wonder, which of us is more afraid? Subscribe. Not because there are more stories, but because some of them haven't finished happening yet.